Welcome, dear listener, to the Sleeping Hourglass. Tonight, as you lie down and let the weight of the day slip away, I invite you to step with me into an ancient silence, a silence that was once a city. Pompeii, it begins not with fire, but with laughter, not with destruction, but with the hum of daily life. Sandals scuffing stone streets, vendors calling out their wares, children chasing shadows across courtyards. A place of prayers whispered at shrines, of bread pulled warm from ovens, of plans made for tomorrow, and yet tomorrow never came. And if you find peace here, if these stories help you rest, know that you are always welcome back. You might even choose to subscribe or simply leave a small gesture of support. Not because you must, but because it keeps this gentle space alive. The morning begins gently in Pompeii. Before the sun climbs over the ridge of Vesuvius, the city stirs with familiar rhythms, each sound a thread in the fabric of daily life. From narrow streets paved in stone, footsteps echo, the shuffle of workers rising early, the steady march of slaves sent on errands, the faint rush of water being drawn from wells. The city breathes into being, unaware that it does so beneath the looming shadow of a mountain whose silence conceals fire. The baker's workshop is already alive. In one corner, clay ovens radiate heat, their mouths glowing faintly. He kneads dough with practiced hands, the flour dusting his arms like pale ash. A small foreshadowing none would notice. Loaves take shape, rough and round, destined for markets and households. Soon, the scent of rising bread will float through the air, a quiet promise of nourishment and ordinary joy. Children dart through the narrow lanes, laughter ricocheting off plastered walls painted with faded reds and ochres. A boy chases a stray dog, its paws splashing in the thin rivulets of water that trickle along the edges of the street. Neighbors call out greetings, doorways open to let in morning light. The city hums with a trust in routine, the certainty that tomorrow will arrive just as today has. In the Forum, merchants begin their daily rituals. Stalls are set up beneath the colonnades, cloth stretched over wooden poles to shield wares from the sun soon to rise. Amphorae of wine, baskets of olives, figs still sticky with sweetness, and jars of fish sauce, garum, Pompeii's pride, are arranged for display. The sound of barter begins, gentle at first, like the opening chords of a song that will grow louder as the day unfolds. Voices mix with the clatter of cartwheels, with the neighing of horses, with the flutter of pigeons startled into flight. The temples stand quietly in their grandeur, their columns pale against the sky's gradual brightening. At the temple of Apollo, priests sweep the steps, preparing for the day's offerings. Incense burns faintly, its smoke curling upward like a whisper. Citizens will soon come with prayers for health, for fortune, for safe journeys across sea and road. In these early hours, the divine feels close, woven seamlessly into the ordinary. Bathhouses prepare to open their doors. Attendants stir the fires beneath hypocaust systems, warming the waters that will steam through the day. Patrons will arrive later, some to cleanse, others to gossip, others simply to linger in leisure. Pompeii is a city that revels in living, in small pleasures and social rhythms that stitch together its people's days. To walk through its streets now, in this first light, is to feel a pulse steady and strong. The villas on the city's edges glow with wealth. Gardens awaken with birdsong, fountains begin their delicate trickles, and painted walls gleam with colours that still hold the freshness of Roman ambition. Mosaics beneath the feet of masters and guests shimmer faintly, wet with morning dew. Slaves move quietly through corridors, preparing breakfast trays, tending to fires, ensuring that the machinery of comfort runs unseen. Behind every polished surface, another's labor remains invisible but essential. The amphitheater, though empty at this hour, waits in silence for the energy of crowds. Here, voices will roar for gladiators, for spectacle, for blood and bravery. For now, only the wind passes through its arches, carrying faint scents from the countryside. Vineyards on the mountain's fertile slopes, orchards heavy with ripening fruit, fields of grain nurtured by volcanic soil. Few cities in the empire enjoy such bounty. Born of earth that once burned and will burn again, life feels abundant, whole, secure. Pompeii believes in tomorrow. Its citizens speak of plans, marriages to arrange, debts to settle, crops to harvest, journeys to begin. A man considers adding a second story to his home. A woman debates the purchase of new fabric for her daughter's wedding dress. A child promises to return to the fountain after school. The city lives in the certainty that the future is waiting just beyond the horizon. Yet the mountain, quiet and solemn, towers above them all. To the Pompeians, Vesuvius is a companion, its slopes clothed in vineyards, its soil generous, its silhouette familiar against the sky. It is not a threat, but a guardian. Travelers admire its beauty as they approach from the Bay of Naples. Sailors steer by its shape. Farmers bless it for its fertile earth. The thought that beneath its green sides lies a restless fire belongs not to this dawn, not to the hearts of those beginning their day. In the side streets, artists dip brushes into pigments, ready to decorate walls with new frescoes. Lovers meet in hidden corners, their laughter hushed. A scribe sharpens his stylus for a day of recording contracts and debts. A teacher gathers scrolls to guide his students through lessons of history and rhetoric. Every profession, every calling, each life flows like a small stream into the greater river of the city's being. And so the morning unfolds. From the highest villas to the humblest taverns, from the bustling forum to the quiet gardens, Pompeii awakens with faith in its own continuity. Nothing in its rhythms speaks of danger. Nothing in its voices carries a note of warning. The city believes it is simply another day, the sun rising as it always has, the mountain standing as it always will. Yet for us, looking back across centuries, the ordinariness of this dawn holds a fragile beauty. We know what they do not, that this hum of life is a prelude, that laughter and bread, commerce and prayer are about to be folded into silence. To walk through Pompeii's morning in memory is to feel both the fullness of life and the aching closeness of its end. The city's strength lies not in its walls, but in its illusion of permanence, an illusion that will be undone in a single day. Still, it is important to pause here at this dawn, to breathe in the life before the ash, to hear the footsteps before the silence, to honor the living before they become shadows in stone. This is not merely a prelude to tragedy. It is its own whole moment, bright and meaningful because it is lived without knowledge of what is to come. And perhaps that is what gives it such tender power. Pompeii's last ordinary morning, unaware of how precious it is. And so the city wakes beneath its silent mountain, each heartbeat steady in the belief of tomorrow. Yet in that very stillness, a question lingers: how long can beauty sleep before the shadow stirs? Above Pompeii, the mountain rises, quiet, immense, and steady. To the people who live in its shadow, Vesuvius is not a threat, but a companion, a dark silhouette etched against the sky, softened each morning by light and each evening by fading sun. It is both backdrop and benefactor, a constant presence whose slopes nurture life and whose stillness suggests eternity. Few who walk Pompeii's streets give it more than a passing glance. Why would they? The mountain has always been there, and always will be. Its sides are clothed in vineyards, rows of grapevines that catch the golden sun and yield wines admired across the empire. The soil is rich, black, and fertile, soil that carries the memory of ancient eruptions now forgotten by those who cultivate it. Farmers bless the mountain even as they dig into its earth, grateful for the abundance it provides. Figs, olives, grain, all flourish here, nourished by the ground that once burned with fire. The irony is invisible to them. They see only generosity. From the Bay of Naples, sailors returning from distant voyages use the mountain as a guide. Its peak, sometimes capped with mist, sometimes sharp against a clear horizon, is a marker of homecoming. The harbour bustles with ships, and Vesuvius towers above it all like a guardian watching the comings and goings of men. To them, it is steady, reliable, a natural compass that asks no questions and demands no fear. But the mountain is not silent in truth. Beneath the vineyards, beneath the fertile fields, beneath the stone that appears so unmoving, a furnace stirs. Ancient Greeks once spoke of giants imprisoned beneath the earth, their breath and fury bursting out through fissures and flames. Romans too inherit such myths, imagining that divine anger sometimes rumbles through the ground. Yet myth gives way to routine, and routine dulls fear. The mountain, in living memory, has offered nothing but stillness. Why should it be otherwise? There were, perhaps, whispers of unease. In 62 CE, nearly 2 decades before Pompeii's final day, a violent earthquake shook the region. Walls cracked, temples toppled, the amphitheatre groaned under the tremors. Some saw it as a warning, others as a test of endurance. Repairs were made, life continued, and the mountain remained quiet. The people adapted, as people always do. They swept away the rubble, rebuilt what had fallen, and learned to live with the occasional shudder beneath their feet. The lesson they took was one of resilience, not foreboding. It is easy, when standing beneath the vastness of Vesuvius, to mistake quiet for safety. Its silence, stretched across years and generations, feels like permanence. The mountain becomes almost divine in its endurance. An altar too immense to crumble, a god too patient to be angered. Children play in its shadow. Elders tell stories of ancestors who also lived beneath its slopes, and each sunrise seems to confirm that this balance will last forever. The poets of Rome write of mountains as symbols of stability, of eternity. Hills may erode, rivers may shift, but mountains endure. Vesuvius to Pompeii is not only land but identity, a presence woven into the city's sense of self. When citizens carve offerings in temples, they do so beneath its looming form. When couples marry, when merchants trade, when actors perform in theatres, the mountain stands as silent witness. It is part of every story, whether acknowledged or not. Yet silence can be deceiving. For within Vesuvius is a chamber of molten stone, a heart that beats slowly, waiting. Science, centuries later, will map its layers and read its history. Volcanic soil speaks in layers of ash, in hardened rivers of lava, in the fossilized remnants of past eruptions. But to Pompeii's citizens, there is no such knowledge, no warning inscribed in the earth they till. The mountain holds its secrets well. To walk now, in imagination, Up its lower slopes is to feel its duality. Vines twist in neat lines, their leaves trembling in the morning air. Birds dart from tree to tree, filling the silence with song. From here, the city below looks peaceful, roofs tiled in red, streets laid out in order. The sea stretches beyond, shimmering blue, and the mountain seems merely a vantage point. A place of beauty and perspective. Yet higher still, the air changes. Cooler, thinner, tinged perhaps with a faint sulphur that few would name. The crater above is quiet, grassy, unremarkable. Nothing in its calm suggests the storm hidden beneath. The people of Pompeii leave close enough to feel the mountain's presence, but not close enough to question it. Their trust is built not on science but on memory, and memory deceives when it is too short. The last great eruption that scarred this land was centuries before, beyond living recall, a story not told, a danger not considered. Without memory, danger becomes invisible, and so the mountain wears the mask of eternity. There is a strange intimacy in this relationship between city and mountain. Pompeii thrives because of Vesuvius. Its soil feeds, its present shelters, its waters flow from springs on its slopes. The mountain gives and the people receive. In this exchange, trust grows. But trust is fragile when it rests on silence. If the mountain could speak, what would it say in these years of quiet? Would it whisper warnings in the tremors that sometimes ripple through the earth? Would it murmur through the sulphur carried faintly on the wind? Or would it hold its silence, waiting for the day when its voice could no longer be mistaken, when fire and ash would speak louder than any myth? The Romans had a word for the awe and dread inspired by natural forces numen. It meant a divine presence, a power felt but not fully understood. Vesuvius was such a presence, whether named or ignored. It was more than land, more than stone. It was a living force, a god that slept. To walk in its shadow was to live in a covenant of unspoken terms, an agreement no one remembered making. As the sun rises each morning, casting its light along the slopes, the mountain's shadow stretches across Pompeii's streets. Children play in it, lovers walk through it, merchants haggle beneath it. The shadow is constant, yet unnoticed, like the passing of time itself. Only when shadows lengthen do we realize how much of the day has slipped by. Only when mountains break do we understand how fragile the illusion of eternity was. And so Vesuvius watches, patient, quiet, immovable. It does not roar, not yet. It does not betray itself in smoke or flame. To the city below, it remains a guardian, its shadow comforting, its presence eternal. But beneath the vineyards, beneath the fertile fields, the heart of fire waits. The tension between beauty and danger grows in silence, like a string pulled taut, invisible until it snaps. And while Pompeii lives in the comfort of the mountain's stillness, a question lingers in the air, like an unspoken prayer. Can a silence so deep remain unbroken forever, or does it always hide a breath waiting to rise? Life in Pompeii is not only lived, it is celebrated. To walk through its streets is to see the Roman way of living in full bloom. A city where leisure is as important as labor, where beauty clings to walls and fountains as naturally as ivy. If Vesuvius is the silent guardian above, the city itself is the stage where daily rituals unfold with color, sound, and laughter. The day begins with the hum of markets and the rhythm of work, but beneath the surface lies a devotion to pleasure, to culture, to the art of living well. Rome is an empire, immense and relentless in conquest, but here in Pompeii its citizens carve out space for joy. Theirs is a life filled not only with duties, but with delight. Step first into the bathhouse, for here one glimpses the heart of social Rome. The air is warm and scented faintly with oils. Water steams as attendants prepare the coldarium, the hot bath where bodies will loosen and conversations will flow. Slaves pour water over the heated stones, the hiss rising like a gentle sigh. Citizens of every rank gather here, their differences blurred in the steam. They wash, but they also speak of politics, of theatre, of rumours whispered in the forum. The bath is not only for cleansing the body, but for weaving the threads of community. From the coldarium, one moves to the frigidarium, where cold water refreshes, sharp against the skin, a shock that awakens the senses. Light filters in through high windows, catching on mosaics that glitter beneath the water's surface. Each tile tells a story, fish darting, dolphins leaping, gods watching from the walls. These are not mere decorations, but fragments of myth and memory, surrounding bathers with reminders of the wider world of Rome, where gods mingle with mortals and the ordinary is lifted into beauty. Step out into the streets again, and the city dazzles with colour. Frescoes adorn the walls of homes and taverns, painted scenes of gardens, feasts, and fantasies. Some show landscapes with distant temples and groves, illusions of space where the real city ends. Others capture moments of desire, lovers reclining, bodies entwined. Passion painted in red and gold. Pompeii is unashamed in its embrace of life's pleasures, its walls speaking with a frankness that later centuries will struggle to accept. Within the villas of the wealthy, beauty deepens. Enter the house of the Faun, one of Pompeii's grandest dwellings, and mosaics spread like woven carpets across the floors. The most famous, the Great Mosaic of Alexander, captures a battle frozen in stone, soldiers in motion, horses rearing, the faces of kings locked in struggle. Yet beneath this grandeur, gardens bloom quietly in courtyards. Fountains murmur. Ivy climbs the columns, statues of gods and nymphs lean gracefully in the shade. These spaces are sanctuaries, where families gather, where poetry is read aloud, where life slows to the pace of flowing water. Not all live in villas, of course. Inns and taverns buzz with another kind of energy, less refined but no less vital. Wooden counters hold jars sunk deep, filled with wine, lentils, fish stew. Patrons lean against the worn stone, drinking, laughing, arguing over dice. On the walls, graffiti etches out fragments of lives, boasts of love, curses against rivals, jokes that span centuries in their raw humour. Through these scrawled words, Pompeii speaks most directly. Ordinary voices preserved in plaster, unfiltered, immediate. And then there are the theatres. Here, the city gathers to watch actors stride across stages, their masks amplifying voice and gesture. Tragedy and comedy alike echo in the stone seats, the crowd roaring in unison, drawn into worlds of gods, lovers, fools, and kings. Theatre is more than entertainment. It is a mirror, reflecting back the ambitions and follies of life. The amphitheatre, too, fills with spectacle, though of another kind. Gladiators fight beneath the roar of the crowd, their courage or desperation etched into memory by those who cheer. To modern eyes, it is brutal, but to Pompeii it is ritual, an affirmation that life is lived most vividly when pressed against danger. Religion weaves through all of this, quiet yet constant. Temples rise in the forum, their steps worn by countless feet. Here, sacrifices are made, prayers whispered, incense burned. The gods of Rome, Jupiter, Venus, Apollo, stand watch, their statues gleaming in sanctuaries. Yet devotion is not confined to the grand. In nearly every home, a lararium holds images of household gods. Small figures of lares and penates watch over kitchens and hearths, guardians of family and flame. At mealtimes, a few drops of wine are poured in offering, a ritual as natural as breathing. Faith is not separate from life, it is folded into its very rhythm. To walk Pompeii's streets at dusk is to see this harmony in motion. Lamps flicker in windows, music drifts from courtyards, and the scent of bread, oil, and wine fills the air. Families gather, stories are told, plans are made. In every corner, life pulses, messy, vivid, ordinary, yet touched with beauty. Pompeii is not a city waiting to end, though we know its fate. It is a city alive in its own moment, in love with its pleasures, trusting in its gods, anchored in its routines. Perhaps this is what gives Pompeii its enduring power. It is not merely a ruin of tragedy, but a memory of vitality. The ash preserved not just bodies, but laughter, art, and desire. We glimpse not only how Pompeii died, but how it lived, and that life is as captivating as its silence. And so, when we imagine Pompeii now, we see both layers at once. We see the steaming baths, the painted walls, the echoing theatres. We see the scribbles of love and longing etched in stone. We see the devotion at shrines, the joy in gardens, the revelry of taverns. And behind it all, we sense the shadow of the mountain, still and brooding, though unnoticed by those immersed in living. Pompeii teaches us that to live fully is to be unaware of how fragile life truly is. The Roman way of living here is not about eternity. It is about presence, about being rooted in the pleasures and rituals of the moment. The city glows in this light, not eternal, but immediate. It is a reminder that history is not only the story of how we end, but of how we lived before the ending came. And as Pompeii lingers in its colours and songs, its gods and pleasures, the earth beneath its feet begins to stir again. Gentle tremors that remind us that even the most joyful city cannot silence the breath of the mountain forever. The city leaves beneath the shadow of its mountain, and though the peak seems steady, the earth below occasionally whispers its unrest. These whispers are not loud, not yet catastrophic, but felt in shudders beneath the feet of bakers, farmers, children at play. The ground, in its quiet authority, reminds Pompeii that it is not only home, but guest upon ancient stone. One such reminder comes in the year 62 AD. The morning begins like any other, with the clamour of markets and the fragrance of fresh bread drifting from ovens. Then the sound changes. Stones rattle, jars tumble from shelves, walls tremble with a low growl from beneath. The earth sways, and for a moment it feels as if the city itself inhales sharply. Roof tiles crash to the ground, statues quiver, and temples split open with sudden wounds. To the people of Pompeii, this earthquake is both frightening and strangely ordinary. They live in a land where the earth often moves, where tremors shake cups in their hands, where cracks in the plaster are part of life's scenery. Yet this quake, stronger than most, leaves scars. Temples to Jupiter and Isis suffer, homes lose walls, and the great amphitheatre requires repair. Inscriptions and records tell us that work begins almost at once. Scaffolding rises, craftsmen climb, and the city patches itself as though covering bruises with fresh paint. Life, after all, must go on. The baker still needs his dough, though he does so in a house with new cracks running across its walls. Merchants still cry out their wares, standing near columns newly propped with wooden supports. Families whisper prayers to the household gods, leaving offerings in the shrines that stand in their gardens, hoping to appease forces beyond their control. The quake unsettles not only walls but minds. Some speak of omens, of the gods displeased with human pride, of divine wrath disguised as shifting stone. Others shrug, saying the earth has always breathed in this way. Fear and dismissal lie side by side, as they so often do when danger appears distant but persistent. Years pass, and repairs continue. Frescoes once broken are painted anew, the cracks plastered over with scenes of gods and heroes. The amphitheatre, though scarred, still draws crowds eager for spectacle. The voices of gladiators rise again, echoing against stone that remembers shaking. Even temples, once split, are rededicated, their columns rising as though nothing could ever have harmed them. The earthquake, for many, becomes a memory softened by the persistence of daily life. Yet the mountain remembers more clearly than its people. Beneath its green slopes and vineyards, a fire waits, building slowly, unseen. The tremors that follow the great quake of '62 are smaller, scattered reminders. Chickens scatter when the earth twitches. Dogs howl at invisible warnings. Amphorae roll across storerooms. These are the murmurs of a restless giant, but to most, they are background noise, the natural rhythm of living on fertile volcanic soil. There are those, however, who notice. The philosopher Seneca writes of earthquakes, of their frequency and mystery, reflecting the Roman hunger to explain nature's secrets. He lives not in Pompeii but far away, yet his words echo a growing unease across the empire. He calls earthquakes reminders of the earth's power, signs that man's dominion is fragile. Still, such reflections belong to scrolls and study, not the clamour of markets or the intimacy of homes. In Pompeii itself, the people mend, rebuild, and move forward. The city's walls, if they could speak, would tell a story of resilience touched with denial. They carry both the beauty of new paint and the scars of old cracks. A doorway may shine with fresh plaster, yet beneath, its stones shift uneasily. A mosaic may glitter in candlelight, though beneath its surface the floor is uneven, tilted by the earth's breath. The balance between fragility and endurance becomes the rhythm of Pompeian life. Children grow up in the years after the Great Quake, knowing only that their houses sometimes shake, that their parents sometimes whisper prayers more fervently, that offerings are made more often to the gods of hearth and mountain. These children run through streets unaware that the ground beneath their sandals once cracked open with fury, unaware that their laughter echoes in a place already living on borrowed time. Even as the mountain looms above, its slopes green with vines, its soil generous to farmers, most do not see it as dangerous. It is a provider, not a threat. Wine made from its vineyards flows into cups in taverns, grapes ripen sweet under its sunlit sides, and life clings to its fertility. How could something so generous also be so cruel? The tremors continue, but they fade into normalcy, like the slow drip of water, like the quiet aging of a wall. They become background. The city grows accustomed to their presence, the way one grows accustomed to the beating of a heart, noticed only when it falters. And so Pompeii continues, repairing what breaks, ignoring what frightens, savouring what endures. They live as all people live, in the illusion that time is plentiful, that danger belongs to another day, that cracks in the wall are simply cracks and nothing more. We, looking back, know differently. We know that these tremors are preludes, that the cracks are not mere scars but prophecies written in stone. We know that beneath their vineyards and temples lies a heart of fire that will one day beat with fury. But they, in their moment, do not. They live, they hope, they rebuild, they believe in tomorrow. The first tremors are warnings disguised as ordinary life. And in this lies the haunting truth. Sometimes history whispers before it roars. The earth has spoken in murmurs, and Pompeii has chosen to listen only half. Soon, those whispers will gather into a voice too loud to ignore. One that will rise in ash and fire as we step toward the day the sky itself begins to fall. The hour of noon arrives with warmth and familiarity. In Pompeii, the marketplace hums as it always has. Merchants call out prices for figs and olives. Children tug at the hems of their mothers' tunics, and the clang of bronze vessels from a nearby tavern marks the rhythm of daily life. The sun, high and bright, spills light onto mosaiced floors and casts sharp shadows against painted walls. For a moment, nothing feels unusual, but then the earth, which has long kept its secrets hidden beneath the vineyards of Vesuvius, begins to stir. Not with a quake, not with a roar, but with a single column that rises skyward. It appears first as a plume of whiteness, thin, almost delicate, like a shepherd's fire seen from a distance. Some notice it and smile, pointing to the mountain as if it were a passing marvel, nothing more than a trick of the day. Yet, as moments stretch, the plume grows darker, denser, taller, until it no longer resembles smoke from an ordinary flame. It swells and stretches into the sky, branching outward until it takes on the form of a vast pine tree, its trunk narrow, its crown heavy, spreading wide across the heavens. The writer Pliny the Younger, who watches from across the bay, will one day describe this sight, the umbrella pine of fire and ash that marked the beginning of Pompeii's final hours. But here, within the city, those who stand in the forum or lean from open windows do not yet have words for what they see. They know only that the mountain they have trusted for centuries is breathing, and its breath darkens the sky. At first, awe outweighs fear. Spectacle draws the eye, and many gather in streets and courtyards to watch. Some laugh nervously, remarking on the strangeness, while others whisper prayers at household shrines, leaving offerings of incense for the gods who govern earth and sky. In the amphitheatre, where echoes of past games still linger, a group of youths debate whether the mountain is sending a sign, perhaps of Jupiter's displeasure. There are those who treat it as a festival sight, a wonder offered to break the monotony of a late summer day. Yet slowly, subtly, awe begins to tilt toward dread. The air thickens. What was once a brilliant noon now seems muted, the sunlight veiled behind drifting ash. Shadows lengthen in unnatural ways, the colour of the day bruised and strange. Birds scatter from rooftops, their wings beating frantically against the darkening sky. Dogs grow restless, straining at chains, whining as if sensing a danger not yet fully seen. Even the hum of the marketplace falters, voices dropping to murmurs as people glance upward more often than at each other. The smell arrives next. A bitter, acrid edge carried on the breeze. It stings the nostrils and settles in the throat. Some cough, waving cloths before their faces, while others remark on the taste of sulphur, the flavour of stone turned to smoke. With each passing breath, the ordinary air becomes a stranger. Then comes the sound. At first it is distant, like a muffled roll of thunder behind the mountain. But the thunder does not fade. It grows, swelling into a deep, unsteady growl. The mountain moans as if in labour, pushing forth clouds that twist and churn with violent energy. Sparks flicker within the darkened column, brief flashes like stars glimpsed through a storm. To those below, it appears as if the heavens themselves are aflame. Panic is not yet full, but unease seeps through Pompeii like water through stone. Some hurry home, pulling children close, bolting doors as though wood and iron could bar out fire. Others rush toward temples, believing only the gods can soothe such fury. Priests lift their arms in prayer, their chants rising even as ash begins to settle upon their hair and shoulders. In villas along the city's edge, servants climb onto rooftops, squinting against the shifting sky, uncertain whether they look upon a passing omen or the end of days. The city's rhythm falters. Bakers leave their ovens untended. Merchants abandon their stalls mid-sale. Theatrical masks hang silent in the colonnades of the theatre, where only hours before laughter echoed. Life hesitates, caught between curiosity and terror. And still the column grows. Higher and higher it climbs, until its crown spreads wide enough to blot out the sun. Noon becomes twilight. Lamps are lit in homes, though it is yet early in the day. A strange dusk falls over Pompeii, neither evening nor storm, but something altogether alien, an hour when time itself seems bent. Pliny the Elder, stationed at Misenum across the water, prepares his ships, compelled by both duty and wonder to draw nearer to the phenomenon. His nephew, Pliny the Younger, watches with awe, penning words that will one day preserve what Pompeii itself cannot. But here, inside the walls of the city, no one thinks of history. They think only of breath, of shadow, of how quickly the familiar can be undone. In the crowded forum, voices rise in argument. Should they flee now, while there is still light enough to see the road? Or should they stay, trusting that the mountain, which has given them fertile soil and rich harvests, will calm once more? Some insist it is folly to abandon homes and livelihoods for a passing storm. Others urge haste, whispering of omens ignored, of past tremors that were warnings in disguise. Yet indecision holds many in place, as heavy as the first stones that will soon fall from the sky. Children cry unsettled by the sudden darkness. Mothers hush them, pressing small faces into folds of fabric, though their own eyes linger upward, wide and unblinking. Fathers gather belongings in haste, uncertain what to carry, what to leave behind. Slaves and servants move restlessly, torn between duty to masters and the primal urge to run. Even the city's fountains change. Water, once clear and inviting, begins to tremble with falling ash, rippling like disturbed glass. Fish sellers, who moments before offered their wares from shallow basins, now dump them aside, the water turned cloudy with dust. A faint layer of grey begins to coat the marble, the first soft blanket of the mountain's wrath. Time slows. Noon becomes a strange dream where everything is familiar yet altered. Colours dimmed, sounds muffled, hearts quickened. People glance again and again at the mountain, as though looking might give answers, as though the eye could decipher the language of fire. But Vesuvius speaks only in smoke, and its words are written across the heavens in letters of ash. Some climb the city's walls to gain a better view. From there, they can see the full scope of the rising column. Its trunk stretches impossibly high, its crown spreading like a vast shadowed canopy. Beneath it, the slopes of Vesuvius vanish, hidden under roiling clouds. To stand upon the walls is to feel small like an insect beneath a storm. And still, many linger. For fear does not always send us running. Sometimes it roots us in place, binds us to the spectacle, convinces us that if we keep watching, we will somehow understand, perhaps even outlast the danger. Pompeii, at this hour, is caught in such a spell. Its people hover between awe and terror, between faith and despair, not yet knowing that their indecision is itself a sentence. The sun struggles behind the canopy of ash, a dim orb barely piercing the gloom. Shadows lengthen until they blur, until the line between day and night dissolves. A silence falls, uneasy and brittle, as though the entire city holds its breath. Then, from the mountain's unseen mouth, another roar erupts. Louder now, closer, the sound of a god waking in anger. The ground shivers beneath sandaled feet. A woman screams. A man drops the jug he carries, clay shattering upon the stones. The hour of spectacle is over. What follows will not be marvel but terror. The mountain's voice deepens, the air thickens, and the first stones begin to fall. Has ended, and Pompeii must now face the fire. The city stands at the threshold of chaos, where the wonder of noon gives way to the storm of evening. The strange twilight of noon does not last long. The sky, already bruised with ash, begins to thicken further, heavy as though it were a living canopy pressing downward. Pompeii, once lit by the brilliance of southern sun, now finds itself shrouded in dimness, and then, as though the heavens themselves crack open, the first stones begin to fall. At first it is not fire but pumice, light, porous rock hurled from the mountain with such force that it seems to rain from every corner of the sky. The stones bounce upon rooftops, skitter along streets, and ricochet from walls, their impacts sharp and sudden. Some are small, no larger than a fist, but others land with crushing weight, denting tiles and cracking beams. The noise is relentless. 1,000 hands drumming upon wood and stone, an orchestra of chaos that grows louder with each passing breath. People lift their arms to shield themselves, cloaks and baskets held over heads. Mothers wrap children in their embrace, using their own bodies as fragile roofs against the storm. Men grab helmets from armories, soldiers' remnants pressed into desperate service as shields. Some run, darting through narrow streets, hoping to find shelter before the stones find them. Others drop to their knees in courtyards and shrines, lifting prayers louder than the din of pumice upon earth. The ordinary has ended. The marketplace no longer hums with the barter of goods, but roars with the scramble for survival. Stalls collapse under the weight of falling stone. Fruit scatters, crushed beneath feet that no longer linger. Amphorae topple, spilling oil that slicks the stones of the forum. Dogs howl, straining at chains, some breaking free and dashing wildly through the streets. In the amphitheatre, where echoes of entertainment once filled the air, pumice rains upon empty seats as if the gods themselves mock the vanished laughter. Above all, the roofs begin to groan. At first the sound is subtle, a creak here, a sigh there. But as pumice piles higher, as weight gathers upon clay and timber, beams bend with audible strain. Families hear the warning in their own homes, the wood complaining under pressure. Some rush to cellars, believing the underground safer than the open air. Others abandon walls entirely, choosing streets despite the bombardment. Each choice feels like a gamble, each breath a wager against what the mountain may yet send. And still the stones fall. They strike with rhythm, a terrible rain that does not cease. Those who run must lift their feet high, stumbling over pumice that already lies ankle deep. The streets, once smooth with wear from sandals and carts, become uneven rivers of pale rock. Sandals slip, Children stumble, elders falter. To move forward is to wade against a tide that is both solid and falling. Temples that once promised safety now groan beneath their own grandeur. Worshippers flood inside, seeking the favor of gods, lighting lamps and chanting hymns. Yet even there, amid incense and carved marble, fear spreads. For when stone strikes roof, no god answers. When pillars tremble, no divine hand steadies them. Some cling tighter to faith, others abandon it altogether, choosing flight over prayer. The gods, it seems, are silent, their temples just as fragile as the houses of men. Night descends, though the hour is still early. Ash thickens the sky until lamps must be lit in streets and doorways. Flames flicker against walls already grey with settling dust. Sparks catch upon rooftops, and smoke rises not only from Vesuvius but from Pompeii itself. A city once painted in colour, reds, blues, golds upon its walls, now fades beneath a single shade of grey. Panic takes shape in movement. Some attempt to flee through the city gates, clutching whatever they can carry. Jewelry, coin, a single loaf of bread, or nothing at all but the hands of loved ones. They press toward the roads that wind away from Pompeii, though already pumice litters the paths, slowing every step. Others remain, unwilling to abandon homes, treasures, and memories. They wait, hoping for mercy, listening to the thunder of falling stone as if it were the pulse of some vast, merciless heart. Among them, small moments of humanity persist. A man lifts a stranger's child and carries him, shielding him beneath his cloak. A woman breaks bread and shares it with those who have fled without food. Neighbours, who days before argued over land or trade, now lean against one another, shoulders pressed together beneath the same fragile roof. Fear strips life down to its essence, and in that essence, people cling to one another. But the mountain is not merciful. The hail of pumice grows heavier, the stones larger, roofs that groaned now begin to collapse. Beams crack like breaking bones. Entire rooms cave in, burying families who had sought safety within. Screams cut through the nightmarish storm, brief and sharp, before being swallowed by the roar of falling rock. Streets vanish beneath rubble. Alleyways fill until they resemble riverbeds of pale stone. The weight of the sky presses downward, and Pompeii, though it resists, begins to buckle. Pliny the Younger, across the water, will later recall how the pumice fell so thickly that escape by sea seemed impossible. Ships prevented from leaving harbours by the floating crust of stone. Here in Pompeii, that same stone buries the familiar world, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. The city that once trusted in the fertility of the mountain's soil now feels the vengeance of its fire. Hours stretch. To those within Pompeii, time itself loses meaning. The sun is gone, hidden behind smoke and ash. The moon does not rise. Only darkness and the endless fall of stone remain. Lamps flicker until oil runs out, leaving many in blind night, stumbling by touch alone. In that blindness, voices call to one another, sometimes answered, sometimes lost to the storm. A mother whispers comfort to a child, though her own heart trembles. A man prays aloud, not caring who listens, his words tumbling into the air as if each might shield him. Somewhere, a singer lifts a hymn, voice cracked but defiant, notes rising even as pumice hammers earth. In the storm of stone, humanity clings to voice, to song, to sound, anything that proves they are still alive. Yet the storm does not end. The mountain hurls its fury without pause, and Pompeii, though resilient, bends further toward ruin. Roofs that once sheltered families lie broken in the streets. Statues that once represented gods lie toppled, arms buried beneath rubble. The very streets themselves grow unrecognizable, hidden under layers of pumice and ash. What was once familiar, home, hearth, market, temple, becomes foreign. The storm from the mountain has become a storm of the city itself. Pompeii, in all its color, sound, and beauty, is breaking beneath the rain of stone. As the pumice piles higher, burying streets and shattering roofs, Pompeii people begin to wonder not only how to survive the storm, but whether the very air they breathe will soon betray them. For after stone and fire comes something heavier still, the ash that turns breath into silence. The pumice has already broken roofs and scattered streets, but now another terror arrives, soft, quiet, and far more deadly. Ash begins to fall. At first, it is light, a delicate dust settling upon hair and shoulders. It seems almost gentle, like a winter snow drifting through the air. But unlike snow, it does not melt. It gathers layer upon layer, filling corners, covering thresholds and sealing doors with its weight. The air thickens. Every breath becomes labor. What once felt like sky now feels like stone, ground into particles so fine they can slip into every crevice, every lung. People cover their mouths with cloth, with sleeves, with whatever scraps they can find, but the ash creeps in regardless, dry and choking. With each inhale, it steals more of life. Daylight fades completely. The sun has vanished behind a sky of black and grey. The city, though it is not yet evening, lies in darkness so complete that torches and lamps barely cut through it. Ash swirls in the lamplight, dense and relentless, turning the flame into a fragile star drowning in fog. Pompeii has become a night without a moon, a night with no promise of dawn. Some retreat into cellars, believing that walls and earth will shield them from the storm. Families crowd into underground chambers, clutching one another, listening to the muffled collapse of the world above. They light small lamps, their flames trembling in the thick air. Down there, the ash still finds its way in, seeping through cracks, sifting through ceilings, filling the very spaces they thought safe. The deeper they hide, the heavier the air becomes. What was refuge now becomes suffocation. Others flee toward the city gates, stumbling through streets already knee-deep in pumice and ash. They move like shadows, muffled by the darkness, tripping over rubble and falling bodies. Mothers carry children on their hips. Fathers drag carts laden with hurriedly chosen treasures. Old men lean upon staffs that sink into the soft ground. The gates are crowded, yet the roads beyond offer little salvation. Ash and stone blanket every path, and the mountain's fury pursues them still. Some collapse before they reach the open road, lungs giving out long before their legs. Those who remain in their homes hear the world narrowing around them. Ash seeps through shutters, piles against doors, until they will no longer open. Rooms grow dim, then dark, then silent except for the rasp of breath and the distant crash of collapsing walls. Some pray in whispers, others rock children to sleep with trembling songs, hoping they might dream through what they cannot survive awake. The air itself has become a weapon. It presses into lungs with each breath, grinding from within. It blinds eyes, fills mouths, coats tongues until words are lost to coughing. The city is drowning, not in water, but in dust. It is a flood of stone, fine enough to flow like a river, unstoppable, merciless. Time seems to dissolve. Night is endless, unmarked by stars or the passage of hours. The storm does not relent, it only deepens. Somewhere, a temple roof caves in, burying worshippers beneath falling stone. Somewhere else, a cellar grows too heavy with the weight above, crushing those huddled below. Streets vanish beneath a tide of grey that grows higher with every passing breath. And yet, even here, life clings to itself. A woman kneels in the ash to help an elder rise, lifting him onto her back despite her own laboured breathing. A boy offers his water flask to a stranger, though ash has already turned its contents to mud. A family, separated in the darkness, shouts names into the storm, voices cracking but refusing silence. Love persists, stubborn as flame, even as the world turns to stone. But breath is fragile. Ash fills the city's lungs, just as it fills its streets. Those who run slow stumble and fall. Those who hide grow faint, their lamps extinguished as the air devours their fire. One by one, Pompeii's voices falter. The city does not die in a single instant, but in countless small silences. Each breath that does not return, each cry that fades unanswered. The ground itself trembles beneath the weight of the mountain's wrath. Ash and pumice cascade from roofs, spilling through windows, burying courtyards. Statues tilt and vanish, fountains choke. Gardens once full of colour disappear beneath pale drifts. A city painted with murals and mosaics now wears only the grey cloak of its burial. The darkness is nearly absolute. Only the faint glow of the mountain's fire, distant and terrifying, flashes through the ash clouds, momentarily illuminating the outlines of desperate figures before swallowing them again. To live in this hour is to live inside a tomb that is still being sealed, and still some hold on. They move toward the gates, toward the sea, toward anything beyond the choking air. They press forward though the ash clings to their sandals. Though each breath is a wound, they do not know if escape is possible, but they know only this: to remain still is to die. And so they move, stumbling, coughing, reaching through the night that has no end. The city itself seems to breathe slower. Its walls, once vibrant with frescoes of banquets and gods, now glisten under layers of settling ash. Its streets, where carts once rattled and children once played, are silent under the weight of stone. Pompeii, in this hour, is already half buried, already half forgotten, already caught between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Ash falls thick, and every moment feels like the closing of a door. The city is being sealed, not by human hands but by the breath of the mountain. And in that sealing, Pompeii becomes a memory even as it still lives, a place half gone before it is fully gone. The ash falls thicker, stealing light, stealing air, until Pompeii begins to vanish beneath its own silence. Yet even this is not the mountain's final word, for soon will come the rushing fire, the storm that allows no breath at all. The mountain has grown quiet again, but the silence is deceptive. It is the hush before the final cry, the stillness before a storm that does not forgive. Above, the column of smoke trembles, its shape shifting, widening, sagging under its own weight. What once rose like a pillar of the gods now begins to bend, as though the heavens themselves are breaking. The mountain exhales not upward, but downward. And with that breath, the true destruction begins, down the slopes of Vesuvius, unseen in their full terror until too late, rivers of fire pour forth. They are not flames that dance in the open, but avalanches of fury. Searing clouds of gas and molten fragments, moving with the speed of storms, faster than horses, faster than human legs can carry. This is a fire that does not burn wood first. It burns the very air. It steals breath before one can scream. silences lungs before one can pray. The pyroclastic surge races outward, rolling low and fast, hugging the earth. It carries with it fragments of pumice, shards of glass like rock, and heat so intense that flesh cannot endure it. Those who are caught in its path have no time to run, no chance to turn. In an instant, they are overtaken, bodies frozen in the final gestures of life, arms shielding, mouths open, steps half made. Stone-hard silence falls where movement once was. The streets of Pompeii are now canyons of despair, roofs that have borne the weight of pumice groan and give way, crashing inward, filling courtyards and atriums with ruin. Temples collapse, their columns toppling like broken reeds, leaving God stranded amid rubble, their altars buried beneath dust. Shops once lined with jars of oil and amphorae of wine shatter, the scent of their contents released for the last time into air already too thick to breathe. The basilica, the baths, the theatre, once proud displays of Rome's mastery, are no longer sanctuaries of culture, but tombs under siege. In the shadow of walls, people cling together, families pressing close in futile protection. Some clasp their children, whispering comforts that fade beneath the roar. Others crouch alone, their eyes fixed on doors that will not open, on streets that lead only deeper into the storm. For a few, there is the desperate choice of flight. They run, blinded by ash, stumbling over the fallen, groping toward gates that are no longer thresholds of escape but markers of despair. The flows come faster, cutting off paths, closing exits, reshaping the city into a labyrinth of dead ends. The sky is no longer sky but a weight. It presses downward, dark, alive with cinders and lightning that flashes inside the cloud like veins of fire. The sun is lost. Day has surrendered to a blackness that feels endless. And in this dark, the river of fire keeps pouring, consuming what it touches, erasing Pompeii not with the stroke of a sword, but with the sweep of nature's hand. Historians will later measure the flows, chart their patterns, and describe them in terms of science, temperatures, velocities, chemical reactions. But for those who lived it, there is no measure but terror. They do not know the words pyroclastic surge. They know only the heat that kills before flame, the air that chokes before dust, the silence that follows a scream unfinished. Time itself fractures in the surge. A marketplace is captured mid-stride, a man still reaching for a basket, a woman still turning her head toward a sound. A kitchen is frozen with bread half-baked, a table half-cleared. In one room, a dog still strains against its chain, its body arched in struggle, its mouth caught in the shape of a bark that will never echo. Life, interrupted, is etched into ash. Some seek the temples, believing the gods may yet intervene, but even sacred walls cannot stand against the surge. Statues tumble, faces of marble break, altars are smothered. What prayers are spoken vanish into a wind that does not carry words but only cinders. The gods of Pompeii remain, but their city is lost beneath their gaze. There are no generals here to command, no legions to defend, no engineers to rebuild. Rome's power, so vast, so certain in every province, proves fragile before this one mountain. All that is Roman, its discipline, its art, its daily order, is swept aside. The empire stretches across continents, yet here, in the shadow of Vesuvius, it shrinks to silence. Still the surge rolls on, a second wave following the first, then a third, each hotter, faster, heavier. The city is not merely buried, it is erased, layer upon layer, sealed away from the light. What was once Pompeii becomes a memory entombed, its streets swallowed, its voices quieted. Ash and fire together create a shroud so complete that even hope cannot escape. And yet, in this moment of devastation, there is a strange kind of preservation. The very force that kills also keeps. The heat that steals life also seals it in form. Bodies become outlines, gestures become eternal, walls crumble, but rooms remain mapped in negative space, a ghostly record of where life once unfolded. The city, though silenced, endures, not alive, but not gone, waiting in its cloak of ash. Far away, across the bay, others watch the mountain's fury. Some take boats, pushing into the sea, waves churning beneath falling ash. They look back, seeing a glow upon the shore, a place where once there was laughter and now there is only fire. Among them, Pliny the Younger writes, his words destined to echo across centuries, capturing in ink what eyes cannot forget. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, has already perished, overcome by the same breath of the mountain that now swallows Pompeii whole. The river of fire slows at last, not because it has relented, but because it has consumed all that stands in its path. The mountain rests again, its anger spent, its slopes reshaped by violence. Beneath it lies a city once busy with trade and theatre and festivals, now silent under stone. The world continues, but Pompeii does not. Its story closes here, though sealed in such a way that one day it will speak again. And so, in the stillness after the surge, there is only ash. A quiet blanket covers every street, every wall, every life. No footsteps echo, no voices rise. The city sleeps, held in a darkness deeper than night, in a silence heavier than stone. The river of fire has passed, leaving Pompeii sealed in silence. Yet even as the city disappears beneath ash, something lingers, an imprint, a memory, a shadow preserved. And in that strange preservation lies the seed of rediscovery, the whisper that one day the buried will rise to speak again. The city grows darker, though the hour is still young. Ash continues to fall like a suffocating snow, blanketing rooftops, streets, and lungs alike. The once bright stones of Pompeii are buried beneath grey silence. Breathing becomes an act of labour, the air, a cruel weight pressing into every chest. And yet, within this twilight, moments of humanity shine with fragile, haunting clarity. A mother kneels in the corner of her home, pulling her small child close to her breast. She rocks gently, as if rhythm might soothe what terror cannot. The child's face is streaked with ash, its small hands gripping tightly at her tunic. Around them, the walls groan with the strain of falling stones, but for this mother, the world has narrowed to the heartbeat of the child against her ribs. She whispers a lullaby, though her voice trembles. Perhaps she knows the words will not outlast the storm. Perhaps she sings only to keep silence at bay. Nearby, a dog strains against its chain, claws scratching at the ground, nostrils flaring as the air grows thick. It has barked until its throat burns, but now the sound fades into pitiful whimpers. The chain rattles as it pulls, desperate for escape. In this struggle, the dog becomes an emblem of Pompeii itself, alive, full of will, yet bound by forces it cannot break. The chain, the ash, the fire, all closing in with merciless indifference. Lovers, too, cling together in the dim light of a crumbling atrium. They have fled the streets, sought refuge where walls might shelter them. Their fingers are laced, their breaths mingled. They do not look to the future, for the future has slipped beyond reach. Instead, they anchor themselves in the present, in the warmth of one another's embrace. Perhaps they whisper words, perhaps they say nothing at all. In the stillness of ash, gestures carry more weight than language. Time itself seems to stretch, as though the city hovers between two eternities. Seconds feel like hours. Minutes dissolve into eternity. Each gesture, each final breath, each quiet cry is etched into the fabric of memory. Pompeii is no longer a city of bustling streets and market chatter, but a gallery of frozen humanity. What is preserved in these last moments is not grandeur, not empire, but intimacy. It is in the clasp of hands, in the reach of arms, in the silent cry of eyes turned skyward. In the forum, a priest raises his hands toward the heavens. His robes are stained with ash, his face streaked with sweat and soot. He chants a prayer to Jupiter, perhaps to Apollo, perhaps to any god who will hear. The words are swallowed by the roar of the mountain, yet still he cries out. His faith is both defiance and surrender, a plea that the divine might spare what human effort cannot. His congregation is scattered now, their temples collapsing, but he continues until his voice breaks. In the shadows, a few kneel with him, bowing heads though their lungs burn with smoke. In another quarter, a group of slaves rush toward the city gates, their chains dragging against the ground. For them, there is no household to guard, no heirlooms to protect, no shrine to tend. Only the promise of escape, though the gates are crowded, though the streets choke with falling debris. They push forward, eyes wide with terror, feet slipping on ash that rises higher with every moment. Freedom and death blur in the haze, as though the mountain has offered them both in a single breath. Children cry out for parents who do not answer. Parents search desperately through the streets for children swallowed by the storm. The city's patterns of order, its laws, its hierarchies, its schedules fall away. What remains is primal, raw, the instinct to protect, to cling, to survive if survival is still possible. The great amphitheatre, once filled with the roar of crowds, now lies silent. Ash drifts across its steps like a shroud. In the baths, steam has long since cooled, the marble floors cracked by the weight of pumice. In the villas of the wealthy, frescoes are swallowed by grey dust. The walls that once glittered with colour now fade into shadow, even as the lives within dissolve into fragments of memory. There is no single death in Pompeii, no moment where the city collectively falls. Instead, there are countless small endings, scattered across streets and rooms and gardens. A man tries to gather his coins into a pouch, as though wealth might hold meaning in this hour. A girl holds tightly to a necklace, a charm against the unknown. A baker, who once kneaded dough at dawn, now curls against the floor, his hands shielding his head. Each gesture is personal, yet together they form a tapestry of shared fate. And then the flows come, fast, unseen until too near. They pour into the city with suffocating speed. The heat is unbearable, searing flesh and breath alike. Walls collapse, roofs crash down, bodies are stilled mid-flight. The city is claimed not by ash alone, but by fire and force, a torrent of death that sweeps away the last motions of life. Yet in this devastation, tenderness does not vanish. A father stretches his arm around his family as though his body might be a shield. Friends fall side by side, hands clasped in final solidarity. Even as fear consumes the air, love writes itself into the silence. The end of Pompeii is not only terror, it is also the fierce insistence of connection, the refusal to let go. Centuries later, when excavators uncover these bodies, it will not be the architecture alone that stirs awe. It will be the poses, the gestures of arms wrapped around children, the curve of a dog straining against its chain, the clasp of lovers who chose to face eternity together. In these forms, carved by ash and time, humanity speaks louder than empire, louder than fire. Pompeii dies not in numbers, not in statistics, but in faces. Each one is a story halted mid-sentence, a life suspended in its final chapter. The city becomes a book of unfinished pages, sealed shut by the mountain's hand. And yet, in the very act of destruction, preservation begins. What is buried is not erased, but held in a strange, terrible memory, one that the earth itself keeps. As the flows subside, silence falls at last. The storm retreats, leaving a city unbreathing, unmoving, yet hauntingly intact. Streets lie empty, homes are still. The air carries only the faint hiss of settling ash. Pompeii has become its own tomb, sealed not by walls or stones, but by the mountain's embrace. In that silence, the final gestures remain, the mother holding her child, the dog straining, the lovers clinging. They become timeless, more enduring than marble, more eloquent than any inscription. The city has perished, but in perishing, it has captured the essence of what it means to live. And so Pompeii closes its eyes, its final moments carved into eternity, not in triumph or empire, but in fragile, fleeting gestures of love and fear. From this stillness, the city will sleep beneath the earth, waiting for the day when shovels strike and whispers rise again. The mountain exhales one last time, and then the roar fades. What remains is silence, vast and unbroken. The ash, once falling in torrents, now settles in stillness, drifting like the final notes of a vanished song. Pompeii lies beneath it, streets, houses, temples, gardens, all veiled in a grey shroud. A city that only yesterday was full of noise and laughter is now as quiet as stone. The roofs are heavy with pumice, the colonnades snapped, the amphitheatre empty. In courtyards, the fountains no longer flow, their basins filled with choking dust. Fruit withers on tables where it was left, bread hardens in ovens, lamps are extinguished mid-burn. The ordinary pulse of life stops mid-beat, yet remains preserved, as if time itself has pressed pause. Pompeii has not disappeared, it has been sealed. Above, the mountain smoulders, its plume thinning into the horizon. Villages nearby are scarred, but the memory of Pompeii begins already to drift away. The survivors flee, carrying fragments of memory, but as generations turn, those memories fade into rumor, then into legend. The world is vast, empires rise and fall, and a small city buried in ash slips quietly into forgetting. Beneath the ground, however, Pompeii waits. Its walls are intact, its streets still paved, its paintings still vivid beneath layers of silence. The city is no longer a home, but a tomb, not of sorrow only, but of extraordinary preservation. In the stillness of ash, what should have rotted remains whole, loaves of bread, jars of wine, jewels resting where they fell. The catastrophe, cruel in its swiftness, becomes an archivist. The disaster is both destruction and protection. Centuries roll by. Rome itself, the empire that claimed Pompeii, crumbles into its own ruins. Roads break apart, aqueducts fall into disrepair, the Colosseum becomes a quarry of stone. The great rhythm of history moves on, and yet, beneath the soil of Campania, Pompeii lies untouched, its streets waiting like the pages of a closed book. Medieval travelers walk unknowingly across the fields where it sleeps. Farmers plow above buried villas, their blades striking against stone, not realizing they are touching walls that once rang with voices. Shepherds graze their flocks on the hardened crust of ash, unaware that mosaics lie just a few feet below their footsteps. For them, Pompeii is not a memory, not even a ghost. It is simply the ground. But the earth remembers what men forget. The city remains held in the palm of the mountain. Its frescoes do not fade entirely, its statues remain standing in their courtyards. Its coins lie scattered on floors where hands once grasped for them. Pompeii's silence is not emptiness. It is waiting. In the centuries of its slumber, the world changes. Christianity rises, monasteries spread across Europe, cathedrals pierce the sky. The language of Rome shifts, the empire's Latin dissolving into the seeds of Italian, French, Spanish. In distant lands, new continents are encountered, new oceans crossed. Pompeii, however, is unmoved. It lies steady, its streets sealed in a twilight neither holy death nor holy life. There is something haunting in this long sleep. Unlike ruins weathered by wind and rain, Pompeii does not erode. It does not crumble into fragments scattered by time. It is whole, but hidden, its existence whispered only in vague tales of a city swallowed by the wrath of the gods. To live in the shadow of Vesuvius is to live with a mountain that keeps secrets. The villagers nearby see its slopes rich with vineyards, its soil fertile with harvest, never imagining the treasure of silence just beneath. Pompeii's long burial becomes a kind of paradox. Its destruction, swift and merciless, secures its survival. Cities that endured, Naples, Rome, Constantinople, changed with the centuries, rebuilt, reshaped, overwritten by new generations. Pompeii alone remains fixed, its moment of ending also its preservation. The fire that killed it granted it a strange immortality. The centuries drift like tides. Wars sweep across Europe, kingdoms rise and fall, faith and reason wrestle for the soul of civilization. Yet beneath the hardened crust of ash, Pompeii waits as though asleep in amber. Its people, frozen in their final gestures, keep their silence. Their homes, locked away, guard their mosaics, their tools, their bread. The mountain's breath has become a vault. One can imagine the earth itself as a storyteller, patient and deliberate. It has closed Pompeii like a book, not to destroy it, but to save it for a different audience. Perhaps it knew that one day hands would return, brushing away the dust, opening the pages again. Perhaps this is why the ash held fast, sealing not only walls but the rhythm of a vanished day. And so the city rests. Its stillness is deeper than sleep, for sleep is measured by hours, and Pompeii's slumber is measured by centuries. No rooster crows, no children's feet scuff the stones, no chariots roll through the gates. Only silence speaks, the kind of silence that is not empty, but full of echoes waiting to be heard. Above ground, the mountain stands calm again, deceptively serene. Its slopes are cultivated once more, wine flowing from its vineyards, olives pressed from its groves. Life resumes at its base, as though the catastrophe were a nightmare long forgotten. But Pompeii remains below, its own dream continuing, untouchable, unchanging. Generations leave and die without knowledge of what lies beneath them. Medieval pilgrims travel to Rome along roads that cross near its burial, never knowing they pass a city whole beneath their feet. Scholars pore over the ruins of Rome, marveling at the Colosseum, the Forum, the Pantheon. Yet all the while, Pompeii sleeps undisturbed, closer to them than they imagine. There is a quiet dignity in this concealment. Pompeii does not call out, does not demand remembrance. It surrenders to silence, trusting the earth to guard its memory. In this surrender lies a lesson, that sometimes what is lost is not truly gone, only hidden, waiting for the right eyes, the right hands, the right time, At last, centuries later, whispers stir. Farmers and well-diggers stumble upon fragments, walls, inscriptions, mosaics gleaming through broken soil. The world begins to remember. But that moment belongs to another chapter. For now, Pompeii remains in its deep twilight, its people sealed in their final gestures, its streets hushed beneath the weight of stone and time. It is not a city abandoned. It is a city preserved, a city waiting. And so Pompeii lies silent, sealed in stone, its story paused but not forgotten. In the centuries of its sleep, the earth becomes its guardian, holding memory until the day when curious hands dig deep and history breathes once more. For nearly 17 centuries, Pompeii lies still, a city sealed beneath silence. The world above forgets, empires rise and fall, and the mountain grows green again with vineyards and groves. Children play in fields above buried temples. Farmers sow wheat on the hardened crust of ash. The voices of Pompeii, its laughter, its cries, its prayers, remain hushed, hidden in the deep. But time has a way of unsealing what it has concealed. The 18th century arrives with curiosity in its hands, with kings and scholars eager to pierce the soil of history. In an age of enlightenment, when men seek reason and rediscovery, the earth itself begins to yield its secrets. And in the fields near Naples, shovels strike stone. At first, it is only fragments. Workmen digging wells and foundations stumble upon walls painted with colour, inscriptions etched into stone, coins and pottery gleaming where none should be. Rumours stir of a city beneath the ground, though most believe it is Herculaneum, Pompeii's neighbour, also lost to the eruption. The earth gives hints in whispers, not proclamations, frescoes glimpsed by torchlight, statues pulled from dark chambers, skeletons lying where they fell. In 1748, systematic excavations begin. What was once myth begins to take shape in dust and stone. Tunnels cut into the hardened ash reveal chambers untouched since that fateful day in 79 AD. Miners, carrying flickering lamps, crawl through the darkness, their picks striking walls that shine with paint still vivid, mosaics still glimmering, vessels still in their places. To enter Pompeii is to step not into ruins, but into a city mid-breath, its gestures frozen, its colours alive. Imagine the awe of those first explorers. By torchlight, they see banquets on frescoed walls, gods and heroes painted in bold hues, the delicate shimmer of glass, the curl of bronze. They uncover loaves of bread hardened into stone, amphorae of wine sealed beneath ash, kitchens where utensils rest as if waiting for their masters. They walk into rooms where the very air feels heavy with the echo of the last breath. And then, the bodies. At first, they are only voids in the ash, hollow spaces where flesh once lay. But soon, methods are devised to fill those cavities with plaster, revealing forms of men, women, children, and animals exactly as they were when death claimed them. Arms outstretched, mouths open, bodies curled against the suffocating ash. What emerges is not skeletons alone, but humanity itself, gestures and expressions captured with aching immediacy. The world is transfixed. Word spreads across Europe of the city unearthed from time. Visitors arrive from courts and universities, from palaces and academies. They descend into tunnels, candles in hand, gazing in wonder at paintings as fresh as if the artist had laid down the brush yesterday. The walls speak, the stones breathe, the silence breaks. Pompeii whispers again, but it is not only scholars who listen. Artists, poets, and travellers are drawn to the city's strange twilight. Here, they find not the grandeur of Rome's triumphs, but the intimacy of daily life caught mid-motion. The frescoes reveal love and revelry, myth and play. Graffiti scribbled on walls speaks of debts, affections, and jokes. The casts of the fallen reveal not statues, but people, ordinary, fragile, familiar. History leans close with awe, for Pompeii does not merely tell of empire, but of humanity itself. It reveals not kings and generals, but bakers, merchants, children, lovers. In its rediscovery, the world begins to see history not as marble monuments alone, but as flesh and breath. Yet the rediscovery is not without shadow. In those early years, excavations are crude. Many treasures are removed and carried to Naples, displayed in the royal collection. Entire frescoes are cut from walls, leaving scars on the homes they once adorned. Tunnels collapse, frescoes fade in the open air, bones are disturbed. Curiosity is often joined with carelessness, and still, Pompeii whispers on. As the decades pass, excavation becomes more deliberate, more respectful. Streets are cleared, villas exposed, gardens revealed. Visitors walk not only through tunnels, but through open avenues where sunlight once more falls on stone. They see the tracks of chariot wheels in the paving stones, the stepping stones that allowed citizens to cross when rainwater filled the streets. They walk past bakeries where mills stand silent, past taverns where counters are still carved with holes for amphorae of wine. The city feels alive, as though its inhabitants have only just stepped away. Every object, every wall, every gesture of preservation tells a story of interruption, of a life paused. Pompeii becomes a mirror, showing not only Rome's past, but the fragility of every tomorrow. To those who uncover it, the city becomes both wonder and warning. Wonder, because it reveals a world so complete, so immediate, so hauntingly human. Warning, because it reminds of the power of the earth, the suddenness with which all can be lost. Vesuvius, quiet now, looms above the excavation, its slopes fertile, its vineyards thriving, its silence deceptive. The mountain is both tomb and witness, both destroyer and preserver. By the close of the 18th century, Pompeii is no longer a buried secret. It is a place of pilgrimage. Kings and queens walk its streets. Philosophers and poets write of its stillness. Artists sketch its ruins by moonlight. The city becomes an emblem of fragility, an echo of fire preserved in stone. It is not simply unearthed. It is reborn into memory. The rediscovery reshapes more than scholarship. It reshapes imagination itself. Europe, in the age of Romanticism, looks to Pompeii as a symbol of fleeting beauty, of love and loss, of mortality etched in ash. Poets write of lovers locked in embrace. Artists paint scenes of final terror. Travelers weep at the sight of plaster faces reaching through time. Pompeii becomes not just an archaeological site, but a shrine of emotion, a meditation on the fragility of existence. And yet, amid all this, the city itself remains quiet. Its stones do not boast, its walls do not shout. It allows itself to be rediscovered, piece by piece, breath by breath, whisper by whisper. Its silence is not broken, but translated so that new generations may hear. We stand now in that silence, centuries removed, yet drawn close by the immediacy of what is found. A loaf of bread, a painted wall, a curled body in plaster. Each detail becomes a bridge across time. The whispers of Pompeii are not shouts of empire, but murmurs of humanity. In them, we hear ourselves. The rediscovery is not complete, for even today, much of the city remains buried. What lies beneath still waits untouched, preserving its secrets. The whispers continue, and will continue, as long as the earth holds what it once took. Pompeii, once silenced, speaks again, through walls and frescoes, through bodies and breath. Yet its most haunting voices are those of the fallen, whose gestures carved in ash reach into the present. And so we turn next to them, to the faces and forms preserved in plaster, where silence becomes a language of its own. The earth remembers more than it reveals. For centuries, Pompeii lay hidden beneath layers of ash and hardened stone, a city sealed in silence. Walls still stood, frescoes still glimmered in buried darkness. But what had been lost most painfully, the people, remained unseen. The city slept like a stage stripped of its players. Yet beneath the hardened blanket of volcanic debris, the shapes of lives endured, like whispers pressed into the fabric of stone. It was in the 19th century that archaeologists, careful and uncertain, stumbled upon something haunting. As they dug through the dense layers of ash and pumice, they discovered hollow pockets, strange voids in the compacted earth. At first, these gaps seemed meaningless, perhaps collapses in the volcanic blanket. But then came the thought. Perhaps these spaces were once filled by something now gone. The suspicion was correct. Within those cavities had lain bodies, flesh, cloth, leather, all long since decayed into dust. What remained was absence, yet absence with shape, with contour, with presence. Giuseppe Fiorelli, the archaeologist who oversaw excavations in the mid-1800s, devised a way to give these voids a second life. He poured liquid plaster into the spaces. Slowly, patiently, the plaster hardened, filling the silent pockets of air with substance. And when the ash was chipped away, the forms emerged, faces, arms, torsos, even the folds of clothing, frozen in the positions of their final moments. For the first time since that day of fire, Pompeii people returned, not as ghosts, but as fragile sculptures of absence, filled and made visible again. The first casts startled the world. Here was no distant abstraction, no faceless tragedy of numbers. Here were men, women, children, dogs, lives arrested in an instant of fear and surrender. One could see the curve of a mother's hand shielding her child, the twist of a body shielding its face, the delicate fall of hair imprinted in ash. It was as though time had held its breath, and the moment of death had been preserved like a pressed flower, fragile but intact. When one walks among the casts today, it is impossible not to feel the intimacy of their presence. They are not statues carved by artists, not idealized forms of marble, but unfiltered humanity. Their fingers are curled as yours might be in fear. Their mouths open in gasps you can almost hear. They remind us that Pompeii did not fall in silence, but in cries, prayers, and clamour. The ash swallowed sound, but these forms echo with it still. There is the figure of a man stretched upon the ground, arms bent as though trying to rise again. There is a child, small and curled, whose form makes the earth itself seem tender and cruel all at once. Dogs, too, were caught, one twisting against its chain, muscles taut in eternal struggle. In their silent gestures lies a story no historian could put to parchment, a testament beyond language. Fiorelli's technique, now iconic, was revolutionary. It allowed the modern world to meet the ancient one, not only through artifacts and architecture, but through the fragile immediacy of human expression. The casts are reminders that history is not merely built of stones and inscriptions, but of flesh that once felt, loved, and feared. They are not relics to be catalogued. They are presences to be witnessed. And yet, there is a strange paradox to them, for in capturing death they grant life. The The figures appear so alive in their stillness that one forgets they are the traces of absence. They reach across centuries, their humanity undeniable, their silence louder than any voice. Standing before them, one feels the boundary between past and present dissolve. The people of Pompeii do not seem gone. They seem here, waiting. The casts evoke sorrow, yes, but also a strange kind of reverence. In their vulnerability, they reveal something universal, that all lives, however ordinary, matter enough to leave an imprint. A merchant, a slave, a child, a dog, none are forgotten when their final gesture is preserved in stone. The volcano made them equal in its embrace, and the plaster gives them back to the world, equal in memory. Walking among them is like entering a chapel of time. Each figure is a candle burning in silence, their flame the echo of a heartbeat that once was. They do not ask for pity, only remembrance. They do not speak, yet they tell more than volumes of history could ever hold. And perhaps, too, they remind us of our own fragility, that beneath the monuments, the frescoes, the grandeur of empires, it is the human story, the trembling hand, the final embrace, that endures longest in memory. We see ourselves reflected in them. Their fear is our fear, their love our love, their silence a mirror of the silence we will one day enter. The casts also carry an unsettling beauty. There is artistry not by intent, but by accident. Curves and forms sculpted by tragedy, turned into sculpture by time and plaster. A mother's bowed head has the grace of marble, though she was no statue but a woman caught in terror. A child's small fingers, delicate and fragile, carry more weight than the grandest temple columns. These were not meant to endure, and yet they do. As centuries pass, the casts themselves grow fragile. Some have cracked, some crumble at the edges. Some have been moved from the earth into museums where temperature and light are gentler. But the impression remains, the idea endures. Pompeii is not merely ruins, it is faces, hands, hearts made visible in their final instant. And so, as we walk through the city today, we do not only tread upon streets of stone and walls of painted myth. We walk among lives paused mid-breath, carried forward by the strange mercy of plaster. In them, Pompeii breathes again, not as an empty shell, but as a community of souls caught in eternity. These figures, resting in their silence, remind us that history is not far away. It is as near as a handprint in ash, as close as the curve of a mouth open in its last cry. It whispers that the past is not gone. It lingers, waiting for us to listen. The casts stand as fragile bridges between life and memory, their silence echoing louder than words. Yet beyond them lies the question of how Pompeii itself has shaped us, how its frozen voices entered our own imagination, waiting to be carried further into the stories we tell. The silence of Pompeii is not empty. It is a silence that hums with memory, with voices pressed into the ash like flowers between the pages of a book. As we walk through its streets, half buried and half revealed, we are reminded that history is not only about the grand and enduring, but about the fragile threads that hold each day together. Here, fragility is not weakness, it is the essence of life itself. The mosaics that once glittered in sunlight are dulled by centuries, yet their colours still speak of beauty carefully laid by hands now long gone. The frescoes on villa walls depict gods and feasts, lovers and myths, moments of joy meant to outlast a single lifetime. And yet they were silenced in an instant, sealed under the heavy breath of a mountain. The paradox is striking. People painted eternity on their walls, even as eternity swallowed them whole. Fragility is everywhere in Pompeii. It is in the outline of a loaf of bread, baked on the morning of destruction and turned to stone by fire. It is in the curled body of a dog, still straining against its chain. It is in the plaster casts of men, women, and children, their final gestures preserved like echoes. These are not symbols of despair alone. They are reminders that life's value rests, not in its permanence but in its immediacy. Every meal, every embrace, every walk along the forum was an offering to time, an offering that, for Pompeii, became eternal. When we imagine fragility, we often think of something about to break, but in Pompeii, fragility is what gives history its depth. Without the sudden loss, we might never have known the richness of its life. Without the ashes, we might never have glimpsed the baker's oven, the merchant's scales, the graffiti scrawled by a passerby who wanted to leave a mark. Their vulnerability became their survival. The very thing that ended them preserved them. There is a strange tenderness in walking these streets now. The stone steps leading to houses are worn, shaped by countless feet. The fountains still carry the faint traces of hands that once touched water to lips. In these details we see not only the fragility of Pompeii, but the fragility of ourselves. What will remain of us? What ordinary gesture might someday be seen as the whole of our existence? A written word, a photograph, a forgotten object in a drawer, all could be the fragile thread by which we are remembered. The people of Pompeii did not expect their tomorrow to vanish. They repaired walls after quakes, rebuilt temples, trusted the rhythm of the seasons. Their confidence mirrors ours. We, too, believe the morning will come, that the world will continue to unfold as it has. But fragility whispers otherwise. It tells us that the earth trembles, the sky darkens, the unexpected can enter at any moment, yet this is not meant to fill us with fear. Rather, it urges us to cherish the moment at hand, to hold it as though it were a precious glass vessel, thin and luminous. Even the mountain itself teaches fragility. Vesuvius, towering and green, appeared eternal to those who lived at its base. Its fertile soil nourished their vineyards, its slopes were dotted with farms. Yet, within its quiet frame, fire was gathering. What seems stable can break, what seems immovable can shift. Nature wears the mask of permanence, but beneath it pulses a reminder. Everything is in motion, and so Pompeii becomes more than a ruin. It is a teacher, its lessons pressed into stone and ash. It tells us that life is not defined by its length, but by its presence. It shows that fragility does not diminish meaning, it deepens it. A flower is fragile, yet it is this very delicacy that makes it beautiful. A day is fragile, and because it can vanish, it becomes precious. In every plaster cast, we see not only death, but love. The child curled against a parent's side. The man shielding his face from falling debris. The woman holding her jewelry close, as if to carry her life with her into the unknown. Fragility does not erase humanity, it illuminates it. It reveals what mattered most in the final breath. Perhaps this is why Pompeii continues to move us centuries after its fall. It speaks across time not with monuments of triumph, but with gestures of vulnerability. The outstretched hand, the bent head, the still body, all whisper the same truth: we are temporary, yet in our temporariness lies the depth of meaning. As we wander through the ruins, we find ourselves breathing more slowly, listening more deeply. Fragility softens our steps, reminding us that even the ground beneath us is not as steady as we think. It invites us to live not with arrogance, but with gratitude. Each sound, each sight, each touch becomes a gift. The lesson is not to fear the end, but to honor the middle, the fragile, fleeting space where life actually happens. Pompeii's stillness is a mirror. In it, we see our own reflection. Caught between the certainty of now and the uncertainty of tomorrow, we may not face a mountain's fire, but we live with the same truth. Life is brief, and in its brevity lies its beauty. The people of Pompeii teach us this not through their words, but through their silence, a silence that endures, that presses upon us like the weight of ash, yet also lifts us into a clearer vision of what it means to live. So let us walk through Pompeii not as mourners, but as students. Let us learn from its fragility the art of cherishing, the art of presence. For in every cracked wall and preserved gesture lies the same lesson. Life is delicate, yet within its delicacy is a strength more enduring than stone. And as Pompeii's twilight settles into memory, its silence does not end, but drifts outward. Carried in the words of poets, the strokes of painters, the footsteps of pilgrims, its echo reaches us still, reminding us that even in ruin, history whispers to those who pause to listen, and tonight, as we close, we let that whisper follow us into rest. And so, Pompeii lingers, not only as ruins beneath a southern sky, but as a tender reminder that life itself is both fragile and radiant. It is part city, part memory, part mirror of ourselves. In the frozen gestures of its people, we glimpse our own laughter, our own fears, our own quiet hopes for tomorrow. Though centuries have passed, their echo still hums in the quiet. Like a candle whose flame has long gone out, yet whose warmth is still felt. Thank you for walking with me through those ash-covered streets tonight. Your presence in this shared stillness makes the story more than just history. It becomes a thread, connecting one heart to another across time. I am grateful you chose to spend these moments here, listening, remembering, dreaming. Now, let the weight of the day fall gently from your shoulders. There is nothing more you need to hold. Close your eyes and let the hush of Pompeii's twilight carry you into your own. May your dreams be soft, your rest deep, and may you awaken with a heart that remembers how precious each breath truly is. This has been the Sleeping Hourglass, where the past tucks you in and history becomes a lullaby. If tonight's story brought you a measure of peace, know you are always welcome to return. The stories will be waiting, patient as the stars. Good night, dear listener. Sleep well beneath the hush of history's lullaby until we meet again in another chapter of time.